Hello, my name is HAPruitt and I'm the author of Anelthalien, a young adult fantasy fiction Christian book. I want to make this video about some writing tips. If you watch my other videos, the story behind the story of Anelthalien, you'll know that my writing process is genuinely, I just get one of these notebooks like this isn't one of them, but one of the notebooks like this, and I ask God to help me listen, and then I write. I don't plan, I don't plot, I don't do any of that. I just ask God to help me listen. And the writing tip number one from that is that you don't have to do it like everybody else. You don't have to write like everybody else. And so just because you hear authors doing this, authors planning like this, authors making, I don't even know, I've learned so much since I've gotten into the author community of things people do to write, and some people have really extensive processes, but you don't have to do it like anybody else. As I said, I just ask God to help me listen, and that's what I do. And so the best advice for your writing process is listen to God and do what He says. If He says do all that planning, do all that planning. If He just gives you a story, just write the story He gives you. The second writing tip, number two, the second writing tip I would have is, as I have written Anelthalien and thought about Anelthalien and just went through it over and over again, I've read the book so many times, and I've kept writing the story of Anelthalien, and I've kept reading over it just because it's really good and I like it a lot. I've noticed that it is like me turned inside out. It's so real because it's kind of like my inner spiritual journey poured out and reformed and remolded into this thing that even I want to look at and I want to learn from, and I do learn from, and I want to share it with other people. I'm such an introverted person, but God's given me this to kind of show a spiritual life laid out and just for everybody to see, totally vulnerable. So the tip from that is be real in your writing, be vulnerable in your writing, pour yourself out. I've noticed my main character is so much like me, and that's a little hard to admit because I don't want people to look at Kindle and be like, oh, HAPruitt is just so anxious and all this, and but it's true. It's like me poured out and me going through all these understandings and realizations, and it's vulnerable and it's real, and I think that is why I enjoy writing it and reading it so much, because it's so very real to me. And then tip number three is it matters. If your writing doesn't matter, then nobody's gonna want to read it. Just a simple example of parenting books. People buy parenting books because they're like, I want to be a good parent. And so they buy parenting books. People buy cookbooks because they're like, I want to cook good food. I want to cook cake. And so I buy dessert food cookbooks, you know? Make sure your writing matters somehow. And it doesn't have to matter to everybody. But again, as I've looked through Anelthalien and I've read it over and over, it matters because it tells how to have a deeper relationship with God. It goes through some hard questions. Not necessarily this particular book. I've got like 7 of these notebooks, more than 7 of these notebooks filled up with the story that continues, book 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. And as I go over them again and again, it answers some hard questions about, like, why does God do this? Why do bad things happen if God is real? What is truth? What do I believe? And it matters. People want to know these things, and that really draws people to read different books. If it matters to them, if it is real to them, when I say real, that tip number 2, it like penetrates your soul, and it makes you more of a person, I guess, if you kind of understand what I mean. And then back to tip number 1 again, just do it however God tells you to do it. And so those are my 3 main tips of writing a book. And then I've got one more tip that I had wonderful English teachers in high school, and one of them recommended this book, The Lively Art of Writing, and it's about writing essays. But chapter 8 in here is about the passive voice. passive verbs are be, am, is, are, was, and were. So it's like saying Kendall was sad. And it talks about how it's not really good to use the passive voice because it makes your writing just kind of flat. And instead of saying Kendall is sad, you say Kendall dropped her eyes to the floor and sighed out an anxious huff, or something like that. You see how it just describes so much more the feeling and the tone, and instead of saying it was a forest, you can say the trees spread out in every direction and the trunks were so large around and the color, you just describe things. Instead of using those passive verbs, use action verbs. Again, back to the example of Kendall was sad. That can only say so much, but when you use the action verbs of what she did when she was sad, it describes it more, it gets you into the story more. And people have been saying about Anelthalien, like, the thing that almost everybody has said is how they love the imagery. It's like they're there, I just describe things so well, and I'm like, oh, that's cool, I didn't know God was doing that. But as God like rolls this little movie through my head, I just see these settings and I've just got to describe them. And so kind of do that with your writing. As you see the settings roll by, as you see your characters doing things, don't just say they did this, like describe it as you see the movie roll out in your head. Describe it as if you were describing it to someone who can't see it, because your readers can't see it like you see it, and you got to do your absolute best to describe it so they get just every little bit of detail and just get to dive into the story too. So those are my writing tips. I hope they are helpful to you. And I hope you also want to read Anelthalien too. So my next videos will be more about the self-publishing process. And again, thank you to Karina's Adventures, at Karina's Adventures. Follow her on Instagram. She's lovely. So bye for now. Oh, don't fall. Hi, if you want to know more about Anelthalien, please follow me on Instagram, check out my Facebook page, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, or visit my website at HAPruitt.com. Thanks for watching!